When this book was published in 1532, the Catholic Church immediately banned it. Critics called it a handbook for tyrants. Napoleon carried it everywhere. Henry VIII kept it by his bedside. It's been called the most dangerous book ever written, and 500 years later, it's still in print, still being read, and still making powerful people uncomfortable. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513 after being imprisoned, tortured, and exiled by the Medici family. He was a career diplomat who had spent decades watching how power actually worked. Not how philosophers said it should work, but how it really operated. The result was a book that stripped away all the comfortable illusions about leadership and told the brutal truth. Power has its own logic, and those who ignore it don't last long. What made The Prince revolutionary and scandalous was its rejection of the traditional advice literature of the time. Every other book on rulership told princes to be virtuous, pious, and generous. Machiavelli said, "That's fine in theory, but a prince who always acts morally in an immoral world will be destroyed. You have to understand power as it is, not as you wish it were." This wasn't cynicism, it was realism, and it changed political philosophy forever. Machiavelli's central argument: a leader must be willing to act against virtue when necessity demands it. He doesn't say, be cruel, dishonest, or ruthless by default. He says, be good when you can, but be capable of not being good when you must. The leader who clings to personal virtue when circumstances demand otherwise will lose everything, including the ability to do any good at all. He used historical examples constantly. A prince who is too generous will drain his treasury and become despised when he raises taxes. A prince who is too merciful will allow disorder to spread, causing more suffering than a single harsh punishment would have prevented. Good intentions, without realistic assessment of consequences, produce bad outcomes. That's not cynicism. It's responsibility. This principle applies far beyond politics. Every leader, corporate, military, personal faces moments when doing the comfortable, virtuous thing will produce worse outcomes than doing the hard, uncomfortable thing. Machiavelli was the first to say this plainly. He didn't celebrate it. He just recognized that pretending it isn't true doesn't make you moral. It just makes you ineffective. If you're finding this valuable, subscribe to the channel. We're exploring the most powerful and controversial books ever written. The ones that make you uncomfortable because they're true. Links to the full text of The Prince and more analysis are in the description below. One of Machiavelli's most famous questions: is it better to be loved or feared? His answer surprises people. He says it's best to be both. But if you must choose, fear is safer than love. Love depends on the goodwill of others. They love you when it suits them. Fear depends on your own power, and they will avoid harming you as long as they're afraid of the consequences. But he adds a critical caveat. Fear must never become hatred. A prince who is feared but not hated is safe. The moment you start taking people's property or their loved ones, fear turns into hatred, and hatred makes people reckless. Desperate people will risk anything for revenge. So, maintain fear through consistent enforcement, but never give people a personal reason to destroy you. In modern terms, respect is more durable than affection in power dynamics. People who respect you, who see you as capable, consistent, and consequential, will work with you even when they don't like you. People who merely like you will abandon you the moment you stop being convenient. Build relationships on demonstrated capability and consistent follow-through, not just charm. Machiavelli described two modes of power through animals: the lion and the fox. The lion uses force and is feared, but can be trapped. The fox uses cunning and cannot be trapped, but can be overcome by force. The great leader must be both. Pure force without cunning gets you outmaneuvered. Pure cunning without force gets you overwhelmed. You need both capabilities, and you need to know when to use which. The fox element means knowing when to break agreements. Machiavelli is brutal about this. A prince who always keeps his word when others don't will be ruined. He must know how to act the loyal ally while being ready to abandon commitments that work against him. If this sounds shocking, look at every major alliance in history: political, corporate, personal. They all break when interests diverge. Pretending they won't is naive. However, Appearance matters enormously. The prince must appear to be trustworthy, merciful, and good, even when he's not. People judge by appearances. Most people never see behind the curtain. Machiavelli isn't advising you to be evil. He's advising you to control how you're perceived. Reputation is a strategic asset, and managing it is part of leadership. Machiavelli had a fascinating view of luck. He said, "Fortune controls roughly half of our actions, but leaves the other half to us." He imagined fortune as a river. When it flows, it destroys everything in its path. But those who build embankments and channels before the flood can limit the damage. You can't control luck, but you can prepare for it. He also argued that fortune favors bold action. The cautious, hesitant leader who waits for perfect circumstances will be swept away when fortune changes. The bold leader who acts decisively, even imperfectly, shapes events rather than being shaped by them. This isn't recklessness. It's the recognition that inaction is also a choice, and often a worse one. He paired fortune with virtue, not virtue in the moral sense, but capability, skill, and force of will. The leader with high virtues can reshape circumstances. When everything goes wrong, they find the opportunity in the chaos. When fortune smiles, they capitalize rather than hesitate. Virtù is the quality that lets a person impose their will on a changing world rather than being a victim of it. Every successful organization applies Machiavelli, whether they acknowledge it or not. Amazon's willingness to destroy its own profitable divisions before competitors do. That's Machiavellian boldness. The leader who fires a beloved but underperforming team member, painful mercy that prevents greater damage. The negotiator who breaks a deal the moment it no longer serves them. These aren't moral failures. They're necessary decisions. One of Machiavelli's most practical insights. There is nothing more difficult to arrange, more doubtful of success, and more dangerous to carry through than to introduce a new order of things. Reformers face a brutal asymmetry. Those who benefit from the old order fight hard to preserve it, while those who would benefit from the new order only offer lukewarm support because they don't yet believe in it. This is why change is so hard. In organizations, relationships, and societies, the people who lose from change know exactly what they're losing and will fight fiercely. The people who might gain from change are uncertain and passive. The changemaker must either arm themselves, build enough power to push through resistance, or accept that they cannot rely on the grateful future beneficiaries to help them get there. Machiavelli gave a memorable contrast. Moses, Romulus, and Cyrus were armed prophets who imposed their visions through force when necessary, and succeeded. Savonarola was an unarmed prophet who relied on persuasion alone and was destroyed the moment his followers' enthusiasm faded. If you want to change the world, you need more than a great idea. You need power behind it. Machiavelli devoted significant attention to the danger of flatterers. Courts and organizations are full of people who tell the powerful what they want to hear, and the powerful, because they're human, tend to reward those who agree with them and punish those who don't. This creates an environment where the leader slowly becomes disconnected from reality. His prescription: actively invite honest advisors and punish flattery. Create a culture where truth-telling is rewarded and comfortable lies are penalized. Ask specific, hard questions. Make it clear that you want accurate information, not reassurance. The leader who surrounds himself with yes-men has voluntarily blinded himself and will eventually walk off a cliff because nobody warned him it was there. He also warned against inconsistency. A leader who is sometimes merciful and sometimes cruel, sometimes decisive and sometimes indecisive, creates an environment of anxiety and confusion. People can adapt to almost anything. They can work under a tough leader or a lenient one, but they cannot adapt to unpredictability. Be consistent in your methods, even if circumstances require different tactics. How do you apply Machiavelli today? First, be honest with yourself about the trade-offs of power. Every position of leadership involves doing things that feel uncomfortable, making hard calls, delivering bad news, cutting losses. The leader who refuses to accept this will either be ineffective or will be surprised when hard reality arrives anyway. Acknowledge necessity, then act decisively. Second, build respect before you need it. Machiavelli understood that credibility is a strategic reserve. You accumulate it in good times and spend it in bad ones. Do what you say you'll do. Enforce consequences consistently. Don't make threats you won't follow through on. Every time you act with integrity under pressure, you deposit into your reputation. Every time you back down, you withdraw. Third, create systems for honest feedback. Actively work against the natural tendency of people around you to tell you what you want to hear. Ask hard questions. Reward the person who brings you bad news early. Create psychological safety for disagreement. The more power you have, the more actively you need to fight against the gravitational pull of flattery. And fourth, if you're going to make an unpopular move, make it decisively and completely. Machiavelli observed that half measures are the worst of all worlds. They injure enemies enough to create hatred, but not enough to remove them as threats. If you must act against someone's interests, do it cleanly, quickly, and completely. Hesitant cruelty is more harmful than decisive action. It's important to understand what Machiavelli was and wasn't saying. He wasn't celebrating evil. He was describing the mechanics of power as they actually operate, the same way a physicist describes gravity. Gravity isn't moral or immoral. It just is. Ignoring it doesn't make you virtuous. It just makes you fall. The greatest leaders in history understood this. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. Churchill made brutal strategic sacrifices. Every transformative figure who actually changed something was willing to do hard, uncomfortable things that their comfortable critics would never sanction. Machiavelli wasn't teaching them to be tyrants. He was teaching them to be effective. The Prince isn't a handbook for villains. It's a cold-eyed analysis of how power works when moral abstractions meet political reality. Machiavelli was trying to give his patron tools that actually worked, not comfortable theories that would get him killed. 500 years later, the mechanics he described haven't changed. Power still has its own logic. Idealism without strategic thinking still gets destroyed. Flatterers still clustered around the powerful. Inconsistency still produces anxiety. Read The Prince not as a guide to become ruthless, but as a map of the terrain you're already navigating. Tomorrow, I'll distill Machiavelli's most practical insight into one 60-second rule. This video was created by combining human research and script writing with AI-assisted visuals and production. For the full text, historical commentary, and modern applications, check the links below.